Welcome back to the Kaspa Silver YouTube channel. In today's video, we're going to be talking about a Litecoin article that was written by some Litecoin user. And this article is entitled, Why Litecoin is Far Superior Than Kaspa. And I'm going to go ahead and just break this article down and kind of just debunk it because I think it just has a lot of false information in it. Say one day, true cryptocurrency believers will learn that trying to silence competition will get you nowhere and just have you repeating the same mistakes. Kaspa isn't a cult. Serious holders embrace criticism and discuss them openly. And that's what I'm doing here today. All right, so to start, he's going to get into Kaspa's fair launch. He says Kaspa's naive holders talk about a fair launch, but they forget that Kaspa had a Discord server of a few hundred members trying to mine a novel, untested chain. There were many issues that first year, so those with dev access were able to mine. In the first year, 50% of the coins were mined by that small group of insiders. Sure, anyone could mine Kaspa, but it was not widely publicized. Kaspa was created by DAG Labs, who spent $8 million to create and mine it. On the other hand, Charlie Lee is literally a genius. He pre-mined the first two blocks and made those LTC unspendable. Then he made a poll on BitcoinTalk.io where he fairly asked people about what time best suit them to first start mining Litecoin. Hands down the fairest launch of all cryptos. Now, he said a lot of things that were not really true about the launch of Kaspa, but it is something to point out that a fair launch is actually extremely subjective because really what is fair? I don't think it's fair that when Bitcoin launched, I was literally a kid in elementary school. So fair in terms of cryptocurrency launches is very subjective. When we talk about a fair launch with Kaspa, what we mean is that no one was able to get the coin without either mining it or purchasing it. Those were the only ways people could get the coin, and no one was able to get it before it was available for everyone in the world to get through the same methods. Jonathan Samploninsky actually has an article entitled In Which I Love My Truly Truly Fair. Mind you, this was written December 13th, 2020, almost a full year before Kaspa even launched. He was already talking about Kaspa getting launched, and this person was claiming that it was not widely publicized anywhere or anything like that. But I'm going to show you that Kaspa was widely publicized. But in this article, Jonathan does break down how fair launches are very subjective and that it is very difficult to make things fair in a cryptocurrency launch. If we were to take Bitcoin, for example, when Bitcoin launched, the first 2 years, it was heavily known that there was probably only hundreds to under 1,000 people probably mining Bitcoin in the first 2 years of its existence. And if we were to compare that to Kaspa, Kaspa actually has a way more decentralized launch than Bitcoin because when it launched during a time where cryptocurrency is a lot well known. And you could see here that the founder of Kaspa, April 12th, 2021, this is like more than 6 months before the launch of Kaspa, he's already talking about the testnet of Kaspa on X. We can also look over here. After Kaspa launched, about 2 weeks after, they posted on the Bitcoin talk forum. Not only that, the Discord was totally public to join. And this is the great thing about Kaspa is that we have this Discord that clearly records everything that's happening at the beginning of Kaspa's launch. So you could see here a day before Kaspa launch, you could see the founder of Kaspa right here, hashtag saying, we'll attempt to launch tomorrow, Sunday around afternoon, Israel time, so 11 p.m. Tokyo, 6 a.m. PT. Someone over here asking about DAG Labs and hashtag explaining what DAG Labs is. DAG Labs as an entity was neither pre-mined, coined, nor any special mining hardware or software. We believe in the coin, hence will mine it. And so that is the clarification for anyone that wants to bring up the DAG Labs FUD. DAG Labs was a company that was developing Kaspa, and DAG Labs ended up going bankrupt, and they decided to launch Kaspa to the whole world fairly. And of course, the people who are working at DAG Labs could also mine Kaspa if they wanted to. And we also have right here, this is about 8 months after launch, and this was a user that was keeping track of how many members are in the Discord. And you could see here that there was 4,848 members in the Discord in the first 7 to 8 months of Kaspa launching. And this is actually much more than the amount of people that was around when Bitcoin first launched. I also decided to look on YouTube for Kaspa videos, and you can see right here, this YouTuber gained 4,325 views, and this was January 12th, 2022. He's talking about Kaspa mining. This is literally 2 months after Kaspa launched. And then there's also another video right here, March 29th, 2022. This is less than 6 months after Kaspa launched, 16,000 views talking about Kaspa mining. So to kind of suggest that like Kaspa was not widely known or anything like that is totally subjective. This claim here that in the first year 50% of the coins were mined by that small group of insiders, it's just a subjective claim to call everyone who was in Kaspa in the early days insiders, because it's kind of like saying Satoshi is an insider because he mined it first, because when he launched it, he was one of the first people to mine it. Is he an insider though? Usually insiders mean that they have knowledge before anyone else has knowledge of when it's going to launch, and then they're able to mine it before or acquire the coin before anyone else is able to. But that's not the case. Kaspa launched, and everyone that was at the time in the Discord or at the time following Yonatan on X could have been ready for the launch and start mining with everyone else. The claim also here to say that DAG Labs, who spent 8 million to create and mine it, is basically not true either. 8 million was spent to fund the employees at DAG Labs to create Kaspa, and then once it was launched, all the people at DAG Labs who were working there could mine it because it was CPU mineable. So you literally just whip up your laptop and you could just start mining it again with anyone else that knew about Kaspa at that time. So next he gets into the security issue of Kaspa and claims that Litecoin is far ahead of Kaspa in terms of network security and would cost much more to 51% attack the Litecoin network, and practically it would take hundreds of millions of dollars to be able to attack the network, and the success rate would still be low. Now, this claim is just, I mean, yes, it costs more to do a 1 hour 51% attack, but just because it costs more doesn't necessarily mean you're better. I mean, no one has attacked Kaspa, and it's much cheaper. On this picture, you could see that it costs about $13,657. I could pull up the website right now, and it's about $15,000 right now. But Litecoin is heavily only able to survive right now because of merge mining. And that's because the script algorithm allows people to mine Dogecoin and Litecoin together. And pretty much it just gives people an incentive to keep Litecoin alive. And in my opinion, I think Litecoin is only staying alive because Dogecoin exists. And if anything, Dogecoin is the better Litecoin because it actually has solved the security budget by having an infinite supply. Probably one of the only proof of works to solve the security budget that way. But we all know it's going to possibly trend to zero because Dogecoin is just a meme coin. It also isn't scalable. It's super slow. People don't really use it or think of it as like a actual alternative to fiat. They look at it as a joke, a meme, and something to hopefully just make quick money off of. But ultimately, the security budget is actually stronger with Kaspa, because if we're actually looking at the emissions in the last 24 hours here, you could see that Kaspa actually produces much more money for miners in a 24-hour period. You could see here it says $353,000 was created in the security budget, whereas Litecoin created only $344,000, which is less than Kaspa's. And another thing to point out is that Kaspa is about 3x smaller in market cap, and yet it's still able to create much more mining revenue for miners. So when it comes to the security budget, Kaspa is actually producing more money for miners. And at the end of the day, just because a 1 hour attack is cheaper on Kaspa to do doesn't mean someone's going to do it, because there's just so many factors involved in trying to commit these kind of attacks that it's just pretty much not going to be reasonable. And another great thing about Kaspa is that it is a unique algorithm. It is not like SHA-256, whereas in Bitcoin Cash, this is really concerning that it's only $10,000, because Bitcoin exists and literally people on the Bitcoin network can just one day say, you know what, I'm going to switch to Bitcoin Cash, troll them, and attack their network, which actually has happened. So it's great that Kaspa does have a unique algorithm, because if you want a 51% attack it costs $15,000, and you also need to get 51% of the hash rate, and that's about 400 petahashes, and that's going to cost a lot of money. So there's a lot more cost involved into doing this attack than just simply putting up $15,000 up and you can attack for 1 hour. It's not that simple. You first need to get 51% of the hash rate, which is going to cost a lot of money. And then you would also need to put up $15,000 every single hour. Is that really worth it? Probably not. He now goes into something called the decentralization issue and just says Litecoin has the fairest launch. Again, that's a subjective statement. No pre-mined coins by the founder or any entity at all. The LTC that were pre-mined on the first 2 blocks cannot be spent. This is the same case for Kaspa. There's no such thing as pre-mined coins. I don't think he understands what pre-mined is. Pre-mined is coins that are mined before anyone could mine the coin or know about it, and that's not what happened, because when Kaspa launched, there was hundreds of people that knew about it when it launched and could mine it with anyone else who knew about it. And it says here, has no founder's stash. Charlie Lute sold his fairly mined LTC almost a decade ago. I mean, I guess that's a cool point. It's kind of questionable why he even sold. I understand that he sold because he feel like he had too much weight in the community. But I think in Kaspa, we've actually successfully been able to understand that whatever amount of money the founders have, the developers have of Kaspa is really none of our business. It doesn't matter. They got their coins just like everyone else could, which is by mining or purchasing it. So good for them. If they want to sell, they can sell. If they don't want to sell, then they don't sell. I'm not really going to be worried about it. And then they said everyone could fairly mine Litecoin from the start. This is exactly true for Kaspa as well. And then they say Litecoin isn't controlled by any central authority and would require consensus from the network's miners to make any changes on the blockchain. This is exactly true with Kaspa as well. No one can make changes on Kaspa unless everyone updates their nodes, which is a totally voluntary thing. So all these claims literally did not hold any water here. Next, he goes into the scalability issue. He says Litecoin has a median fee of practically 0 cents and handles approximately 200,000 transactions per day. There have been cases of million transactions per day, and yet its network has never been clogged, and for that reason, Litecoin also doesn't need RBF. On the other hand, Kaspa's 1 second block is a technical failure. Kaspa's 1 second block creates too much data despite barely even being used and is physically impossible to propagate. We're going to stop right there. So first off, Kaspa is running 10 blocks per second now. And then he says that it creates too much data, which I don't know what he means by this, because currently, as of recording, my node that I'm literally running behind me here in my office is currently taking up about like 40-50 gigabytes, and it pretty much stays there. He goes on to say also not a scalability issue, it's mostly a decentralization issue and integrity matter, but this leads to chain trimming, therefore removing old transactions and thus deleting any evidence of early blockchain history. Lastly, for this matter, Kaspa network fees skyrocketed when order nodes were introduced, again despite barely even being used. So these claims are just kind of funny, because it seems that Litecoiners think that having no fees is a great thing, because they don't understand that proof of work cryptocurrencies can only survive if they are used and they are producing fees for miners. Litecoiners have this low time preference where they're very just dependent on the block reward to fund miners. But Litecoiners, what are you going to do when that block reward continues to have every 4 years? What are you guys going to do? Your price has actually not been doubling every single 4 years. We can actually see this picture right here. Every single halving, your price is not doubling. So that means you need to come up with security budget revenue to sustain the miners that are losing 50%. Now, thankfully, you guys have merge mining, and it kind of keeps your miners a little bit more profitable because you have Dogecoin. But I think relying on a meme coin to continue your security budget is a very concerning thing. And so Litecoiners just seem to not like fees at all, but fees are a thing that are just inevitable. You need to have fees to keep your proof of work sustainable in the long run. But his claim here that he says that Kaspa's network fees skyrocketed when order nodes were introduced, again despite barely even being used, is just such a false claim. The fees did not skyrocket. In fact, I actually had to address this back in the day because people were making this weird claim that Kaspa was congested and had high fees, so it solves nothing. And I said, you're being ignorant. Being scalable does not equal being feeless. And this is what I think Litecoiners don't understand. 25 cents for a fee to go through like normal is not a high fee. And this is how much it did cost for your transaction to go through faster than waiting for the mempool to clear. Kaspa was handling 300 transactions per second for hours with this same cheap fee. Bitcoin can only dream of this same for Litecoiners and all other proof of work cryptocurrencies out there. And in fact, what actually happened was that Kaspa put in a record of 8.86 million transactions in a single day, which Litecoin can only do about 1.2 million in a single day. That is the most it's ever done. Kaspa did 8.86 million, and it cost 25 cents so that your transaction can be included a little bit faster. Mind you, this was also before Kaspa had 10 blocks per second, which increases the transactions per second to 3,000. And then a few months later, Kaspa went on to make 15.79 million transactions go through. And this again is before 10 blocks per second came out, which increases our TPS to about 3,000. So if we did have 3,000 TPS, the likelihood of the fee market even activating would have been much lower, and also Kaspa could be able to handle closer to 200 million transactions in a single day. Now, fee market would still kick in, but because of the high throughput, the fee market will not be as expensive as Bitcoin, where we're seeing $40 for a fee. We're going to be seeing cents for the most part when it comes to this fee market, and Kaspa is going to continue to scale. Its goal is to continue increasing its blocks per second so that it can keep those fees low when more and more people start using the network. Now, if we're being real here, the network that is actually not scalable is Litecoin, and here's why. I asked Grok how much our transaction size is right now, and can you calculate the amount of daily transactions possible with that storage filling up an entire block. The average Litecoin transaction size is approximately 226 bytes based on recent data, with 4 megabyte blocks, 4 million bytes, approximately 17,699 transactions can fit in a full block, leading to about 2.5 million transactions daily. And that's all Litecoin can pretty much do every single day, about 2.5 million transactions daily, whereas Kaspa can today handle closer to 200 million transactions in a day, which is a lot better for massive adoption. And then I went ahead and asked, what would be the size of the chain yearly? With full 4 megabyte blocks, the Litecoin blockchain would grow by approximately 1 terabyte every single year. Is that sustainable? No, it's not sustainable. Whereas Kaspa, if it had 200 million transactions processing, if all the blocks were full on Kaspa, the node for Kaspa would pretty much only be upwards to about 200 or 250 gigabytes ever. That's the most it will reach, because Kaspa only needs 3 past days of data for a newcomer to be able to sync to the network and run a full node. I actually explained this in more detail in this video right here, talking about Kaspa pruning explained. And so if you are interested in learning more about that, you could check out that video. Now, this is probably the only good claim that a Litecoiner has against Kaspa. He says the fungibility issue. Litecoin deployed MWeb in 2022, which was a layer 1 upgrade that works as a sidechain that is as secure as the mainnet, but offers fungibility and faster transactions. In simple terms, MWeb works like cash. The amount of LTC sent and the addresses involved are hidden. You can't track balances or transactions, making Litecoin fungible. So basically, there is something on Litecoin to make transactions totally anonymous. Now, this is cool that Litecoin has this, but this doesn't mean that Kaspa can never get something like this as well. And as of recording, there are people who are actually working on mixers right now to increase your privacy when it comes to your Kaspa addresses. And I think it's not that difficult to hold your Kaspa and still at least remain pseudo-anonymous while you're on the network. A next point he says here is the scarcity issue. It says Litecoin only marked its 90% mined supplied a few months ago, 13.5 years after its inception, whereas Kaspa had 90% of its max supply mined in just 3 years, a massive red flag to long-term sustainability. Now, I have an in-depth video talking about the rapid emission schedule of Kaspa and why I think it's a genius idea. And so just to keep it short, Kaspa had to pick its poison. You either have a very slow emission schedule, during a time where crypto is a lot more easily adopted, and we would have to suffer with ASICs coming onto the network because Kaspa is not an ASIC resistant coin. We would have to suffer with ASICs coming on the network with less than 50% mined. And that would have been a very, very bad thing, because then a lot of the Kaspa would have been able to just go into a very few amount of people. But since Kaspa was GPU mineable and it had a very fast emission, we were able to give a lot of the coins to individual people, since GPUs are a lot more easily accessible by people worldwide. And that way, when ASICs came online, Kaspa was about over 50% mined already. And that way, when ASICs came online, there was a lot less coins left for ASICs to acquire, meaning that most of the coins were distributed. And also, another thing to note is that when you have a very fast emission schedule in the very early days, you're going to have a lot of people with a short time preference, because when Kaspa launched, it launched as an unfinished project. A lot of people in there were mining Kaspa had no idea whether or not this was going to be a success. So a lot of them were selling their Kaspa, and you can actually go in the Discord and look back in the old chat rooms where people were literally selling 1,000,000 Kaspa for like $200, because people just did not know how to value it. It didn't have any exchanges, and it was people were able to mine a bunch of it, and it was just switching hands a lot. So ultimately, Kaspa had to pick its poison. If you did it too slow, we would have centralization of coins. And if we do it too fast, well, now we have to face another problem, which is a problem that every single proof of work has to face. And that is, how are we going to keep our security budget sustainable if the block reward runs out? Now, the thing about Kaspa is that it's going to be the first proof of work to try to take this head on and see if it can solve it without implementing some kind of tail emission like Monero did. It's ultimately trying to actually solve this by being used and by being the most used proof of work in the world. And so time is going to tell us. I still think there's still plenty of time for us to see what's going to happen before it becomes super concerning. But that's pretty much what happened there when it comes to the fast emission schedule of Kaspa. Next, he goes into the FUD about the lost chain history of Kaspa. And I know so many people have been always questioning me about this over the years since I joined Kaspa. And it's funny because the link that he links this proof to links to this very old article that has been debunked time and time again, and it's actually outdated. In this article, it says here, it all starts with one of the early Kaspa holders DMing me a few weeks back, noting that he could not find his transaction from February 2022 in the Kaspa Explorer. I did a bit of digging and found out that not just his transaction, but there wasn't any data on any transactions from before May 2022. Anyone can verify this for themselves by scrolling back in this miner address here. Rewards stop in May 2022. And unfortunately, and fortunately for Kaspa holders, this isn't true anymore. We actually recovered the data, and so if you click this link, the data is actually going to load, and you can see exactly how much Kaspa this person was receiving on all of these days. In fact, I can actually go to the very beginning of this address and see the very first transaction this address acquired, and you could see that this was on December 28th of 2021, which is only a month after launch. So the claims are simply a non-issue and just don't hold much water. And this really just goes back to what recently happened. SuperTypo was able to recover a lot of the old missing transaction history, and so about 75% of it has been recovered, and there's about 25% left, which isn't too much. But what was great was that we did even recover the Genesis block, which we can prove now that it has an empty UTXO set. There are no coins here, meaning that there was no pre-mine or anything like that. Kaspa literally started with 0 coins existing at that Genesis block. And on top of this, the missing 25% literally does not affect anyone. It only affects a person who might have been around at that time and mined it, but this doesn't matter to the security or decentralization of Kaspa, because these transactions are missing the 25% that's still missing. So when you see this claim being thrown around, it's really just a non-issue. And if you are just coming into Kaspa now, it really doesn't even affect you because you're going to be able to see all of your transactions today if you commit any on the network. So he goes on to say, like, hey, Litecoin has all of its history and Litecoin has never been down. No wonder Kaspa is not adopted anywhere, but Litecoin is adopted everywhere where Bitcoin is. Now, the claim that Kaspa is not adopted anywhere is obviously just not true. Kaspa is adopted in a lot of places. I personally use Kaspa almost daily now because I actually text people while using the Kaspa network with Cassia. So Kaspa is getting adopted, and that's just a subjective take on this issue. So his last point here is Litecoin has a proven track record surviving all crypto storms throughout the years since 2011. Litecoin is the blockchain that first activated SegWit Lightning Network, which Litecoin doesn't even need because it's better than Lightning itself, and it's only better because no one's really using it. And if anyone was to start using Litecoin heavily or massively, the world started adopting it, as we discussed, it will start to break down. In contrast, no one builds on Kaspa, uses it, or cares about it. It's simply a PND ghost chain whose insiders, first miners, and buyers took advantage of it, and now it's the late buyers suffering. It will most likely never hit all-time high again and have a slow death. And so all that is just subjective opinions. Kaspa is being heavily adopted. I mean, literally, we can look here. Kaspa literally has a entire foundation that was created for it that outside players saw Kaspa and realized the potential that it could have in the world, and they created the Kaspa Industrial Initiative. We have players like Casplex, Igor Labs creating layer 2 solutions and smart contracts for Kaspa. So people are building on Kaspa. The claim is just obviously not true. And last but not least, this is the chart of Kaspa against Litecoin. And if we're looking at Kaspa against Litecoin here, you could see that ever since Kaspa launched, Kaspa gained over 25,000% against Litecoin. So if you were holding Kaspa, it was a much better idea to do so ever since 2022. This chart doesn't even go back to 2021. So imagine if we were able to get that history as well. We can't get it because Kaspa wasn't really on any exchanges yet. But obviously, like everything that goes up, at one point it does come down. And unfortunately, Kaspa has been in a bear market. And I think this is healthy, in my opinion. I think it has to happen. Kaspa is not just going to go up forever. But nonetheless, if you've been holding Kaspa since February of this year, you have pretty much been outperforming Litecoin. You are up against Litecoin about 40%. So I think in the long run, Kaspa is in a true zero-sum game with Litecoin, and it will outperform it. I mean, we're literally talking about a 3x different in market cap before Kaspa then just surpasses Litecoin. And so when it comes to Kaspa versus Litecoin, I truly do believe that this isn't a battle like when it comes to Bitcoin, where we're battling something that has very large network effects that we need to battle against in terms of being able to gain value against Bitcoin. With Litecoin, I think it really comes down to the fundamentals and technology, and it's going to be like a Google versus Yahoo kind of situation where the better technology is going to just win in this case. That's what I believe the Kaspa versus Litecoin debate is going to be at, and I firmly believe Kaspa will surpass Litecoin in the coming years. I hope you guys enjoyed that video, and before we go, if you have not considered getting yourself a Tangem wallet, Tangem does have these Kaspa exclusive cards, and if you do use the code Kaspa Silver at the checkout, you can receive 10% off your order, and it does help support this channel, and I greatly appreciate that. When you hold your Kaspa on an exchange, you may or may not ever see your Kaspa again if that exchange was to go bankrupt. So it's very important that you do self-custody your Kaspa and hold it on your own wallet, and Tangem is a great place to do that. Thank you again for watching. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you guys are new around here. And as always, don't be average, be different.